It seems like everybody's got something to say about the emotionally unavailable man. And I believe that it's only fair that you get the perspective of the individual who is actually within those shoes, or as they used to say, directly from the horse's mouth. So this is my part 3 of the confessions of an emotionally unavailable man. Now, in this video, I want to get into my healing journey. This was actually something that was requested a few times from part 2, which I will link in the description below. So I was asked, how did you get to a space of healing? And this is something I do want to take a deep dive into. But before I dive into this, I want to make this clear, because I feel like this is the most important thing when it's all said and done, is for you to know and to recognize that when you have a man who is emotionally unavailable in your life, we are not necessarily going out of our way or intentionally being this way. We're not looking to invalidate you intentionally. We're not looking to hurt you intentionally. Many of the things that we do, or at least in my experience, many of the things that I was doing from a subconscious level. I was doing from a state of fear. I was doing from a state of suppression and repression. I was suffering in the midst of that. And so my suffering became the suffering of the one that I claimed to love. And this came from, my earliest stages of life, from as early as infancy, when I was, a little child, before I had any sort of conscious awareness. I was being programmed into what a man was and what a man was not. And this wasn't just in my household where it was prevalent, right? I grew up in an African household and moved to the United States. So I have kind of a different experience, but nevertheless, I was still raised on the same media. I still saw the same imagery on television, etc., that said, this is a man. A man does not display emotion. A man is not one who is vulnerable, who shows who they truly are, right? They keep everything close to their chest. And so this is what I believed a man was. And then I obviously saw this in my own household, seeing a man who displayed the exact same features, the exact same characteristics. And so I started to mimic those. Again, as early as infancy, before I had any recollection of even who I was, before I had a quote unquote personality, I was already developing these belief systems about what it was to be a man. And so, I ended up finding myself taking these subconscious beliefs, getting into adulthood, or even teenage years into adulthood. And I found myself in relationship dynamics where I was displaying those very same behavior patterns. I was distant. I was keeping people at an arm's length, not even knowing that I was doing so. So I wanted to start there because, you may be in a situation where you feel as if this person is doing this thing against you. Like they're looking to be malicious. They're looking to go out of their way, that every man is a narcissist because, they're emotionally unavailable, whatever it may be. And that's not the God honest truth. For most of us, we might even be doing our best in that situation, but our best is not going to be enough for where you are, right? And that's the genuine truth. It wasn't anybody's job to raise me. Nobody's job to raise a grown man. It was my job to come to a place of consciousness, to become aware that I am this type of individual, as opposed to hiding from that, hiding from the reality. It was time for me to do that inner work. And getting to a place of healing was not one of these things that was completely intentional, right? I didn't choose to shift my level of awareness. I believe that awareness is something that is offered to us, right? By the universe, God force, etc. I believe that awareness is always at our doorstep, and we have opportunities to become aware of who we actually are, to go within. But oftentimes we're so filled with distractions that we never really have to, technically, right? It's so easy not to do the inner work. It's so easy to continue to project our own insecurities or our own shame, our own guilt onto the world. So for most of my life, I was ignoring that call. I was not intentionally stepping into this healing space. And it was actually when I found myself, in my old apartment back when I was living in the Bay Area by myself. I thought I had it made. I thought things were popping off, 2-room apartment in the middle of one of the most expensive places in the world at this point in time. Some ridiculous prices, but it is what it is. And, had a perfect job for myself, was a single man. I was thinking to myself, wow, I'm living life. But I found myself sitting in my living room by myself, and I had this moment, a literal moment. It was like one of them come to Jesus type moments, where I started getting these flashes in my head of all these moments that had happened where I had lost something, or something had not panned out because of my own fear of commitment. And this was triggered by me seeing these things on my whiteboard. I had goals and things of that nature that I wanted to achieve. And I looked at this board and I said to myself, why are these things not happening? Like, why are these things not getting done? And first it started as, wow, I'm not giving time and attention to the true version of who I am, because I was in a corporate job at the time, and these weren't corporate goals. These were goals within, what I wanted to do, let's say here with content creation, with music, etc. And as I looked at that, I realized, man, the things that I love most, I continue to neglect, I continue to abandon because I have a fear of commitment. And as I had that thought process, I started seeing myself also in relationship dynamics where my own fear of commitment had ended up in these relationships where I was never fully there. I was never available for the individual. It wasn't a real relationship. I wasn't relating to them. I wasn't connecting. There was no true intimacy. Sure, might have been, bedroom activities, but there was no intimacy. There was no true connection. And I started seeing this, and it brought out such a deep emotional response that, like, for the first time in probably years, I cried. Like, I cried a deep, deep cry because I was seeing that I was doing this to myself. And I think it was the first time where I had that realization that, like, you are doing all of this to yourself. You are closing your heart off, and you're allowing life to become this thing where you're never, ever satisfied. You're never sticking to the things that you truly love. You're never representing yourself in an authentic way. That's actually where it started for me. Now, everybody's different. So that might resonate with one, and that might not resonate with another. But for me, it did enough to where I finally realized something has to change. I have to do something different. I can't keep living like this. And from that moment, I opened my heart up. Well, at least I didn't know I was open my heart, but I said, I'm willing to do whatever it takes in order for me to do whatever is necessary for this to change. I don't want to continue to have these relationships, these situationships, right? That I abandoned before I even got into them. I don't want to continue to keep people at arm's distance and feel no connection to the one that I claim to love. I want something that is real. And so from that place, for the next 2 years, basically, leading up to this point really has been this emotional healing journey, or as I call the wholeness journey, because we're really just coming back to a place where we remember that we've always been whole. But it started in that moment, and it became this progression of me finally looking within myself at the most painful aspects of the things that I was avoiding. I came to realizations like I was holding on to a deep level of shame. I believe I was inadequate, that I was not enough. And so I would do a multitude of things in my external world in order to validate myself, right? I was looking for people to accept me in different ways. I wanted to be seen as worthy because I was not able to find that within me. And so I would put on a mask, a disguise for the world to show this individual who, didn't need nobody, didn't need nothing from nobody. Right? I'm good by myself. I can do with or without you. I carried that type of mentality with me, that gorilla type of mentality, because I believed that that was going to protect me, at least. It was going to protect me emotionally, when really what I was guarding or protecting was a feeling that I was not good enough. And if anybody saw that inadequacy, if anybody saw that deep shame that existed within me, they would reject me. So I was fearing that rejection, and so I was going to reject you first. The fear of commitment is nothing more than that. I'm afraid if I give myself to this thing is going to leave me. If I give myself to this thing isn't going to work out, and then I'm going to be heartbroken. I'm going to be the one left in shambles, right? And so this was the first time in my life where I actually went within, because I'd been doing personal development, self-help, etc. 19 to 20 years old, like I got off my addictions. I stopped selling dope. I moved out of a certain lifestyle that I was living, and I was seeking an identity. And personal development was powerful at that time, but I didn't understand that I was still doing external work. I was still looking to prove and validate myself just in different ways externally. It was only at this transitional point where I finally realized, nah, bro, like this is all within. This is all internal. Even the conversations I was having with myself, I was so mean to myself. How could I not be to anybody else? I was beating myself up on a constant basis. How was I not going to display that to the rest of the world? I didn't know how to love myself. I didn't even realize that one had to love themselves. How was I going to love somebody else? Now, a lot of that came from my religious programming, right? From a fundamentalist Christian background, where I was taught that I was unworthy, undeserving, that, I was not worthy of God's love, etc., unless, I fulfilled this condition. So I moved around with that same energy. I would quote unquote love you conditionally. If you show up a certain way, then I'll show you some affection. Again, I wasn't doing this intentionally, but I understand that though you may not do it intentionally, you are still producing that result. You're still hurting that individual. You're still bringing deeper wounds and deeper scars into somebody else's experience because you have not dealt with your own. And that's where I found myself. And, it was not an easy thing to just accept, but I had made the decision that I wanted so badly to have that intimacy, that depth, that connection, that true relationship. I wanted that more than anything else at this point because all my life I had pretended. I had, had the external look of the thing, right? Like it was never hard for me to be a committed or a faithful or a loyal man, right? I know some folks, that's a very different story, and that's quite unfortunate. That's why I make a lot of the type of videos that I make. Like, we got to do that inner work as men, women, everybody. If you're going to be in a relationship, be in the relationship. But still, even though I was fully committed, even though I was 100% there physically, it didn't mean that the entirety of myself was there. Most of who I am, which is the emotional aspect, right? Which is the psychological aspect, was distant, was void, was untrusting, was looking at my partner as if they were somebody who could switch up in a heartbeat. And so I felt I had to protect myself continuously. And I know some of y'all may be hearing this and thinking, well, that sounds valid. That sounds reasonable. It's not. It's really not. Living from a place of fear, living from a place where you cannot trust is a hellish type of experience. There is nothing sweet about it. There is nothing safe about it. You're building up these walls high as you can, right? You're building these walls to the sky. And nothing can get in, nothing can get out. That's how it feels. You feel trapped. And I felt trapped for so long. And I didn't know I was trapped until I felt the heaviness start to lift off of me because I was finally accepting this. And, I had stepped into a relationship at the time that was one of my greatest teachers, I believe. And it's actually the one that segued me into my soulmate relationship. So I'm thankful for what it was, but it showed and exposed so many different aspects of my own shadows. It showed me how many insecurities were still dwelling within me. It showed me how I truly viewed relationship dynamics and the stories that I was telling myself about relationships. It showed me the depth of my program, the depth of my belief systems that were keeping me from truly loving. And it started with loving myself. I used to think that was hella corny. I used to think that self-love and self-worth and all these things, first I thought it was a sin, coming up as a Christian. But then when I got out of that space and I started thinking for myself, I started thinking, well, it sounds like something that's for them, that's for the women and that's for, that's soft. But in reality, it was the only necessary truth that was going to change my life. Getting to a place where I could actually accept myself, where I could actually love myself, right? And it sounds crazy to me now thinking, wow, I really, did not or was not able to acknowledge the importance of inner love, the importance of inner value, of seeing my own worth. But that's where I was. So it was a journey really for me to discover that everything that I was desiring, everything that I was running from, everything I thought was not within me, everything I was seeking from the external world, I had to find within myself. And once I started doing that, then I was able to step into relationship dynamics and be that individual, be that person more and more, to a place now where I'm not willing to accept anything else from myself. And I'm not putting expectations on my partner to raise me, right? And they don't have to validate me. Though I have the most validating, incredible, beautiful, immaculate, sensational, like the most incredible woman that, God than ever made it, she still does not have the responsibility of being something for me that I'm supposed to be for myself. And, in a lot of those past relationship dynamics, when I was emotionally unavailable, I would look for my needs to be met from the outside. So when they weren't, quote unquote, met, then I'll just write the person off or say, see, there's an example of exactly why I can't give myself, right? I would use everything as a reinforcer of staying in that space of emotional distance because I was emotionally distant from me. That's what it really was. I was so distant from the authenticity of who I was. That's what that was really about. So this is this is kind of a summary of my own healing journey, like coming from this place of being completely emotionally unavailable to getting to this place of, healing. Now, I probably will do a part 4. If you guys request a part 4, I will do a part 4. And in part 4, I'm definitely going to get into the subject matter of what life has been like after the fact, right? As well as even some of the work that I did, etc. Because maybe you have somebody in your life and you're thinking, man, this person just needs this message. And I understand that. But you have to also understand and accept that it's not your responsibility, nor can you change anybody. You can plant seeds, but you can't make the seed grow. You can't allow it to sprout and grow roots, etc. It has to go through that process itself. So you gotta let that man simply go through what he's going through. And if he's not willing to, then you gotta make a decision for yourself. In the same way, fellas, it's the very same thing, right? If you have somebody in your life experience and they're not showing up in that way, you might have to let that situation go. But I know that the greatest thing that ever happened to me and for me was, it seemed like the most painful thing at the time. It really did. It was this realization of, man, I'm doing this to myself. I'm the one closing my own heart off. And so I'm closing life off from me. And I didn't want that anymore. I couldn't do it anymore. So appreciate you guys for tuning in. Before I tap out of here, tap in with my first published book, Doing Me Guilt-Free, Breaking Free from People Pleasing and Unleashing Your True Personal Power. This right here is, I believe it's a lifetime investment. It's one of those type of books that's going to live with you every day and probably for the rest of your life, to be honest, right? And that's nothing arrogant or cocky. It just simply, it's one of those messages that every single one of us needs, including myself on a daily basis, to live an authentic life, to live from a place of true personal power. So if you want one of those, make sure to click the link in the description below. Thank you guys once again for tuning in. Till the next time, namaste, namaskar.